image near the altar which you built for yourself, the Lord your God. You shall not set up a sacred pillar, which the Lord your God hates. Do you see the connection between the justice of God and the worship of God? You see what is going to get them off track? What is going to ruin their justice? Idolatry is going to ruin their justice. Not that they don't have enough lawyers running around that have been to law school. Not that they don't have enough judges that are able to vote themselves a pension or whatever they are, a lifetime appointment. No, not that we don't have enough geniuses that way. What is going to pervert your justice is if you begin to worship other gods. Very clear there. Any questions so far? Characteristics of kingdom courts from 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And we'll read what Paul has to say here in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. By the way, of all the churches in the New Testament, which one do you think is the most characteristic of the modern church? The Corinthians need an awful lot of letters. They had an awful lot of problems. And really, they were the church that got the most ink from Paul. And if Paul thought that they of all the churches should exercise kingdom courts, then all churches really should. If that church with all its problems could do this, what church can't? He says, dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints. Dare any of you. He's saying, how dare you? How dare you go before unbelievers to settle issues? And don't do it before the saints. Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? That the world will be judged by you. Are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Do you not know that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If then you have judgments concerning things that pertain to this life, do you appoint those who are least esteemed by the church to judge? I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you, not even one, who will be able to judge between his brethren? You know what Paul is saying there? It's quite an indictment. He's saying, it looks to me like the reason why you can't judge in your own church is because you don't have a wise man among you. Well, think about that. How many churches exercise church courts? I don't know of any. You know what Paul's solution is, or Paul's reason is? The only reason why you don't have church courts is because you don't have a wise man among you. That's an unpleasant thought. I go to a church. Here's what he says. I say this to your shame. This is so. There is not a wise man among you, and not even one, not even a single one, who will be able to judge between his brother goes law against brother, that before unbelievers. And Paul is shocked. See, he's not coming out like, well, we're it's kind of good. You guys are on the right track, but we need to take it up to the next level. And I think now we're ready for church courts. I'm not saying that. I can't believe you people cannot judge. That doesn't even have a wise person to judge between brothers. We'll talk about that in a minute. Kingdom courts originate within the church. Anybody ever think, you see Eastern Orthodox bishops? You ever see the, I can only say funny outfits that they wear? I never knew where they came from. I heard R.J. Rush doing a lecture on this in his History of the World CD series. I just didn't know. He explained where their outfits came from. And they look kind of funny, but I mean, they're very obvious from a distance. You know, the Eastern Orthodox guys wear something that looks kind of like a dress almost, really. chains around and so forth. You can really spot them at a distance. Where those uniforms, those outfits came from is during the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Roman Empire, the Roman courts, you could get no justice in the Roman courts, and the people knew it. They were backed up. They only heard the cases they wanted to hear. They heard the cases that would benefit the judges and the lawyers personally. If it had to do with a couple of slaves or whoever, no one wanted to hear about it. And people then decided to go someplace else for justice. And you know where they went? Imagine this. They went to the church. Imagine that. They went to the church. And they kept on looking for the local bishops. And finally, the bishops decided to make it easier to be spotted. So they began to wear uniforms, if you will, certain outfits that made them easier to be spotted so that justice could come closer to these people who needed it. And that's where those outfits came from. Those outfits were generated by a sense of justice for people who needed it, because they weren't getting it in the state. Kingdom courts exist because the saints are qualified to judge. Remember earlier when we asked the question, who's qualified to judge? Does not Paul answer this question right here? Saints are qualified to judge between each other. The opposite then is obviously true. Pagans are unqualified to judge. Judgment in churches is between and not above. Interesting that Paul says there that you judge between. Is there someone who can judge between, brother? Not from above. Not from way up high with a gavel and you're in my courtroom now, what I say goes, and all of, I don't want to say nonsense, but you got to stand up when the judge comes in, and you got to call him your honor, and all this kind of good stuff. He's just kind of way, way above you. And that's not what Paul's talking about. He says, I'm talking about someone who can judge between your brethren. Isn't that what you do in your home? Among your children, when there's a spat between your children? You judge between. Not as like some great big lawgiver that no one can touch. Because you care for both parties. And that's what true justice is all about. Doing the right thing for everyone. The only way you're going to do the right thing for everyone is to do the right thing by God's law to begin with. I really believe this is the case here. These folks were going to pagans in order to cheat. I think there were certain people in the Corinthian church that knew that if the other people in the church knew what they were doing, that they'd be thrown out of the church. Let me ask you something. Isn't the church's business what goes on that affects the church? I mean, if two guys have a dispute within the church, is that the business of the church? Sure is. Especially if one person is doing something that is against God's commandments. And oftentimes that kind of a person is going to have a prominent place within the church. Come on, we all know cases like that in church, where a person hangs on in the church and hangs on and hangs on, and there's an awful lot of rumors about business dealings that are illegal and unsound, and frankly, larceny oriented, I guess we can say it that way. But he's a big guy in the church, and no one really knows what's going on, so everybody's just hush-hushes the situation and doesn't talk about it. You see, I think Paul knew what was going on. Paul knew an awful lot. He had contact with people from Corinth, and I think he had specific cases in mind. I think he knew some of the cases that were going on here, and I think he's saying the reason why some of you guys are going before unbelievers is because you'll get a favorable ruling. If you went before saints, you wouldn't be able to keep on doing some of the stuff you're doing. Well, how do we fix this situation? Well, before we do that, I want to talk about a particular passage from the Old Testament, Zechariah. I want to kind of discuss this a little bit. I'm going to read the entire chapter. And I want you to hear the emotion that God comes up with here, because God doesn't always speak emotionally, if you will. Sometimes he does. For example, in Malachi, where he comes out and he says, I hate divorce. I hate it. You people are robbing me of a godly seed. I hate what you're doing. He's just not saying, hey, thou shalt not divorce. Let's go on to the next verse. God does speak that way sometimes.